The days of the Emerson as an oil tanker are over. 3 months ago, it sailed here to the Bay of Bengal in Bangladesh on its own steam. Today, it awaits its destruction. The 20-year-old tanker has become a liability for its Japanese owners. Its insurance premiums sky high, its age rendering it unseaworthy. Now, its new owners, Bangladeshi businessmen who bought the 22,000-ton vessel for $185 a ton, are interested in only one thing: its value as scrap, its harvest of steel.
All development activities depends on the infrastructure of a country. For building the infrastructure, iron and steel is an important part to play with. So in Bangladesh, for building our infrastructure and other development activities, this shipbreaking industries, rather ship recycling industry is very important.
Turning a vessel from ship to scrap is a growing industry in the world today. This industry is called shipbreaking, and the story of shipbreaking, or ship recycling as the industry wants it to be known, is a remarkable one. Ships that survived years of high seas, thick fogs, and heavy loads will now be dismantled as they were built, by hand. Thousands of workers, using gas torches, hammers, and winches, will turn these boats into jagged steel plates that are then melted into steel rods for use in construction. Before shipbreaking, Bangladesh imported all of its scrap steel. Today, these ships satisfy 80% of its needs. After World War II, the United States of America and parts of Europe broke the world's ships in specialized dry docks. Then a rise in labor costs and an increase in the supply of steel from traditional capital-intensive sources redirected the world's fleet ready for scrapping to China and, on a much smaller scale, Korea. China dominated shipbreaking until the 1990s, with up to 1,000 facilities operating on its beaches. But as recently as the mid-1990s, stricter regulations and a lack of demand for steel in China have forced ships to set sail again for a new destination, this time South Asia. It is to this subcontinent, specifically India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, that some 700 ships are now sent each year for breaking. The yard at Alang in India is the biggest in the business, breaking 500 ships per year. The rest are broken down in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and China. Although their involvement varies, all shipbreaking nations have one thing in common: they have come under fire for becoming dump sites for the industrialized world. Critics say their beaches are an environmental disaster, and their shipyards an example of the poorest of working conditions.
Shipbreaking on beachheads in the Asian countries, of course, represents the downside of globalization, because after the industrialized countries of the Western world are through using these ships, when they're no longer usable, they're just scrapped on the beachheads without dry dock facilities or any kind of safety measures for the workers involved. And of course, the challenge posed by this is how this can be done in a safer manner. It will never be perfect because the optimal conditions are not there, but improvements can be made, and that is the challenge that we are faced with.
So how are the world's ships dismantled? Our story begins with the death of a ship. Here, the St. Nicholas II is making its final journey to the shores of Bangladesh. Shipyard owner Mohammed Mohsen bought the ship on the world market and is now running it aground on these sloping beaches, a perfect place to break a ship into bits. Once the anchor is dropped, workers will begin by stripping the ship of all removables. The removed objects will be sold to local shop owners whose stalls line the streets close to the shipbreaking yards. There they sell anything from toilets to life-saving rings, from glass bottles to plastic containers. As the ship is broken, boilers and machinery are removed and sold on. Though the ship's steel is the main prize, nothing else is wasted if money can be made. Once beached and emptied, the ship lies ready for destruction. What follows is dangerous and backbreaking work. Over months, men, both younger and older, mostly from far-flung districts, take a vessel apart steel plate by steel plate. At every point in the process, an accident is waiting to happen. Falling pieces of steel, gas explosions that have sent up to 25 men flying into the sea, accidents that deafen, maim, and blind. The potential for harm is everywhere. You can see the workers know this all too well. They urge you to stand back from a frayed steel cable pulling a piece of the wrecked ship weighing 80 tons. Experience tells them we cannot be far enough away if the thick cable breaks, a whiplash that could remove a limb or a head or cause other fatal injury. You would expect full safety gear in these conditions, but goggles are rare, as are arm and leg guards. Workers carry loads exceeding the 30 kilograms allowed by law. Their bare feet trample through a debris-littered shipyard. No cleaning up happens here. Asbestos, for example, lies scattered on the ground. After 4 to 7 years of exposure, asbestos dust will form scar-like tissue in the lungs and make breathing extremely difficult. These are tough working conditions. These chanting men are carrying steel plates that elsewhere would be moved by machines. Instead of the roar of engines, there is the sound of voices following a chanting leader. His work is highly valued, and he earns as much as the highest skilled workers in the yard. From the shipbreaking site, the steel is taken to primitive rolling mills. These are situated away from the yards, and many also belong to the shipyard owners. Apart from the mills and the yards, their business cards show a list of different enterprises, dealing from rubber to vegetable oils, garments to fisheries. According to the shipyard owners, profits from these other industries subsidize the less profitable breaking of ships. Even here in the final stage of the transformation of a vessel from tanker to steel rods, workers are no better off than the shipbreakers. Working in extreme temperatures with primitive machinery, accidents are not unusual. The blistering heat is staved off with mere headscarves, and the speed of the process, with glowing bars reaching temperatures of over 1,000 degrees centigrade, allows for no mistakes. These men work for around $2 a day. Depending on who you talk to, the length of the working day changes. Some say they work only 8 hours. Others talk about unpaid overtime. For us, it was clear that work carried on well into the night. The earlier a ship is finished, the sooner the next one can be beached. Who are these men and where do they come from? Many are like Ashraf and his 19-year-old son Robel, who have been working here for the last 3 years. They come from one of the poorest districts of Bangladesh, called Bokhara. Both are steel plate carriers and, like many workers from far away, live in the quarters erected by owners of the shipyards. Living conditions are barely adequate. Many men share a single well for water, and there is no toilet. Work is a few steps away. Father and son have left the family in order to support it. Both work at least 8 hours for 120 taka, or slightly more than $2 a day. They keep enough money to live and send the rest home. Robil's father says he does not want his son to spend his whole life in the shipyards, but is unsure what other job he might get.
চেষ্টা করে দেখা লাগবো বাইরে যে কোনো এখন যে কোনো একটা চাকরি ব্যবস্থা করা লাগবে
চাকরি কোনো কাজে টাজে কি কাজে দিতে পারেন দিলে কোন চাকরি কি রকম ধরনের চাকরি
সাধারণ ধরনের চাকরি নয় লেখাপড়া তার বেশি নাই যেরকম যোগ্যতা সেরকম চাকরি
জায়গায় আপনি কাজ করেন তোমার কি তোমার বেতন কত
120 টাকা
তুই কি করো এই টাকা কি করো বেতন পাওয়ার পরে
খাওয়া খরচা যা থাকে তাই বাইরে পাঠা দেয়
আচ্ছা আর তুমি কতদিন পর পর বাড়ি যাও
2.5 মাস 3 মাস পর পর
বাড়ি যাও
Few of these workers are local men from Chittagong or Dhaka. One worker told us only men from poor districts are prepared to do this kind of work. But what rights do they have far from home? None is the answer from the Bangladesh Institute of Labor Studies, which says they have no regular employment, appointment letters, job security, benefits, or unions.
The workers in the shipbreaking yard, because they are suffering a lot, they definitely encourage establishment of union. But the employers in those areas, most of them are local people. They belong to the locality and they are quite powerful people in the locality. They don't allow people to go there and organize union. There are examples that some people, even without establishing a union, they were trying to project their grievances, and those people were even beaten and they lost their job. So the situation is not favorable for trade union.
Tell you the truth, the union, they tried to come. They came many times, talked to the laborers, but all the laborers are saying, I'm working hard, why would I go talk to you? And as we have seen, all the trade union have been working in this country. Every factory has the trade union. They are not working now. I can give you many examples. If you have trade union, they just come up with their demands, not with the work. They come up with their demands, not the demands, but they don't come up with, they don't do the work.
Who then takes care of the workers? What are the employer's responsibilities? And how much do they contribute to the workers' welfare?
The employers there, they are more keen about the profit. They don't want to spend money on the safety devices. They don't organize any training for the people who are working there. And most of the workers working there are illiterates and they are without any background, any training or anything. They just enter and start working because they're poor and they don't have any job.
In their own defense, shipyard owners blame accidents on ignorance and carelessness. They claim new workers are especially at fault from lack of experience, and they say that accidents peak among these novices. The contradictory awareness of danger was obvious. Some men were respectful of frayed winch ropes, others blasé about the constant sparks. Some carried safety glasses instead of using them, others didn't seem to own any at all.
Our education percentage is very low. Naturally, our workers are less educated or not educated. These people need primarily some knowledge about hazard and accident. Hazard, accident and incident. And the points of hazard should be explained to them first. If they get the knowledge of hazards that can happen, accidents that can occur, or incidents that they may face, they will get automatically cautious about their work and rate of accident will get down.
The question then is there a decent way to break ships? In an ideal world, yes, but it costs money. Here, conditions are different. Shipyard owners want change, but say the funds are lacking. Thus, they look to the government for help in providing hospitals, accommodations for workers, a fire brigade. 25% of the ship's value is paid as customs duties. Owners say this money could easily give shipbreaking a more human face.
Actually, we are not getting some cooperation from the government, nor we are getting any help from the government. Suppose in other industries you get tax holidays, but here no tax holiday. In other cases, there are government interference, but here it is the seaside, nobody bothers. Government is interested only for getting the big amount of taxes and VATs and all these things.
Someone to start a business, definitely he has to come up with some capital, and in case of any lack of capital is there, banks are there, so they can take loans from the bank, and they can run their business with their this money or loan taken from the bank, so they should not have face any problems. It is not that they are not making profit. So if someone is to earn some profits, he has to invest also.
In the meantime, workers have few options. In the most densely populated country in the world, they are only too grateful to have a job, no matter what the cost in health and safety. But if local conditions are not conducive to wide-scale improvement, what is the international contribution going to be toward changing the nature of shipbreaking in South Asia? We went to the International Chamber of Shipping in London to determine the role of ship owners in this global question.
Well, I think the principal one is raising the profile and raising the understanding. I mean, I can honestly say that after 30 years in the industry, this was not an issue that had even crossed my desk once until 2 or 3 years ago. We simply did not have any contact with the ship recycling industry. It was something way down the road. We're now aware of the problem. There is a limit to what we can do. I mean, we can only cajole and encourage within the ship owning industry. If regulation comes, regulation will come, but that regulation from the ship owning side will clearly stop short of the facilities and conditions in the recycling yards themselves. Today, the average ship owner has very little say over where his ship ultimately is broken up. He's selling to an intermediary. The intermediary is the guy who is responsible for determining where the ship will be sold on to. It is possible, of course, for the ship owner to contract direct with the shipyard, but your average ship owner, owning maybe half a dozen ships, simply does not have those contacts.
Who then is ultimately responsible? The maritime magazine Lloyd's List foresees the number of scrappable ships tripling in the coming years, as vessels built during the 70s boom become obsolete and unseaworthy. The increasing number of ships to be scrapped will force shipbreaking yards to work faster as more boats come ashore. Yet there may be a positive side to this race against rust. More boats may mean more pressure to improve working conditions as the industry expands.
All the world has left their job. Now only we 4 or 5 countries in the world. If we don't break, where we go with these ships? This is a hazard for you also, headache for you also. We are not only breaking the ships, we are saving you, taking these old ships. What you do with these big ships? If you consider the global village context economy, then we are doing a very big job. Otherwise, like Titanic, we have to sink all the ships on the ocean.
Although the problem might look to be insurmountable, there are a number of practical measures which can be taken, such as provision of training for the workers, identification of hazards, equipment such as goggles, helmets, gloves, and training them to recognize hazards, and of course providing enough sort of hygienic facilities in their rest places so that they're able to recognize hazards later. And of course the question is, workers alone will not be able to solve the problem. Now we will need a global partnership of the ship owners, the shipbuilders, the wreckers, employers, trade unions, and of course government inspectors to see that these standards are enforced.
In the end, more ships will mean more shipbreakers. Meeting this challenge will be a major test for the globalization of decent work.